Okay, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board work session for Thursday, April 15th, 2021. It is 10 a.m. on the nose. My name is Ty Menford, Chair of the Board. We have Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edwards, and Commissioner Carolina Mejia will be joining us in just a moment. County Manager Mira Chavez, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell, and our Director of Public Works Jennifer Walker. Today, the work session relates to the LOTT Clean Water Alliance, and we have the Executive Director of LOTT, Mike Strube, and Matt Kennelly. And Matt, I forget your job title at the moment.
It's now Assistant Executive Director.
I know it changed. Okay, Assistant Executive Director. That's good. That's easy to remember. So I'm going to let the County Manager set this up, and we've got half an hour devoted to this topic. The public may follow along on our county YouTube channel or by conference call at 360-252-9020, pin 1234.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Matt. Good to see you both. Commissioners, this is an informational briefing. No decisions are expected from you today. And I myself, I always look forward to learn even more about what LOTT does for the citizens of Thurston County. And as you know, you serve on the board, Commissioner Menser. And there's always great information for us, for you to share, for us to learn from you. So Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Romero, and thank you, commissioners, for having us. We always enjoy an opportunity to come and visit and tell a little bit about what's going on. Today, we're going to do things just a little bit differently. We're going to offer a little history. We realize it's been a quarter of a century, really, since the planning, the highly managed plan was developed and put into play, which caused LOTT to be the organization that it is today. And so a lot of time has passed, and we think it's timely maybe to start looking back and remembering some of the history that may be disappearing because of the time that's passed since we started that. So that's what we're going to do here today. And as Romero said, I'm here as the Executive Director. Matt will be providing part of the presentation as the Assistant Executive Director. So LOTT is really composed of 4 jurisdictions through a governmental nonprofit organization, which just really means we have to, even though we're a corporation, we have to act as a public agency and operate under government protocols. It's a collaboration of the 4 governments, Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston County. And currently, Mayor Pete Komet is the president of the board from the city of Tumwater. Deputy Mayor Cynthia Pratt is the vice president of the board. And we have Council Member Lisa Parsley from the city of Olympia, and of course, Commissioner Menser from the county. Our mission is to preserve and protect public health and the environment by cleaning and restoring water resources for our communities. Our service area consists of about 175,000 people. Of that, the sewer population is about 120,000, 116,000, and we have a septic population of about 55,000, or about 30% or so. And as you'll learn later, we have an active program to convert septics that are problematic, and we've been working with the cities on a very successful program that LOTT helps fund to convert those septics. And in fact, Lacey has a very aggressive program right now that we're really all pretty happy with. The program is very successful. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's going to dive a little deeper in what we do and how we do it. So Matt.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so our main treatment is at our Bud Inlet treatment plant in downtown Olympia. Average flow coming into our plant is about 12 million gallons per day, and that can fluctuate quite a bit when we have significant rains come in, because we have combined sewers in downtown Olympia that are stormwater as well as sewer. And so we could see peak flows coming in well exceeding 50 million gallons per day. Just recently, I think we saw 62, 63 million gallons per day. And our plant can handle it, but it takes a lot of planning and timing on how to stage treatment in those scenarios, which we've trained for. We treat to the strictest standards on Puget Sound. And compared, it's advanced secondary is what it's called. And the discharge from our Butt Inlet treatment plant heads out into Butt Inlet in a couple hundred feet of a diffuser pipe. We also produce reclaimed water on the order of about 1.5 million gallons per day, primarily in the summertime. So our treatment process is fairly complex, but we like to show this graphic because it breaks down. We have these physical processes and our biological processes, whereas our physical steps up front remove rags and grit and other things that come down in the treatment process, such that we can treat the nitrogen and oxygen demand components in our biological process. So there's a series of very complex steps. But what we're doing is we're really using nature to break down those components that we don't want to send out into Butt Inlet or reuse in our community. So what I'd like to show you next is a video that we recently developed. We're very excited to roll these out. This particular video shows how we clean wastewater in just 5 key steps. There's a series of videos that our outreach and education folks put together. So this kind of highlights some of the things you might see in those videos. So I will share a different screen here in order to show you that video.
Just how do we clean the water that comes to the Butt Inlet treatment plant in Olympia? Well, here's the process in a nutshell. First, the dirty water arrives via a large underground 5-foot diameter influent pipe. Step 1, our headworks, where we take out the trash. Headworks, that is where we remove all the garbage from the wastewater. The incoming water runs like a river through big screens that filter out the trash, which then gets sent to the landfill. After we screen out the trash, the water flows through the grit chamber, where we get the smaller, heavier items out, aka the grit. Things like coffee grounds, eggshell bits, and dirt sink to the bottom of the chamber. Under the floor in this giant room is step 2 of the treatment process, known as the primary clarifiers. In the primary clarifiers, the water slows down and more waste settles out. The lighter stuff, the stuff that floats, are the fats, oil, and grease, called fog for short. The heavy material, yes, that's the poop, though we call it sludge at this point, will sink to the bottom. Long panels skim the bottom and top of the basins to remove the sludge and fog. Time for step 3. The next step in LOTT's wastewater treatment is the biological process. In this step, we use 60,000 to 70,000 pounds of microbes that work at the plant around the clock to help clean the water. In these basins, we mimic nature by using bacteria to break down the waste and gobble up the nutrients. It is especially critical that we remove the nutrients from the water, especially nitrogen, which comes from human waste, food, and some soaps and detergents. If excess nutrients are released into Puget Sound, it can cause algae blooms. Then, when the algae die and decompose, the oxygen becomes depleted in the water, which can cause other aquatic plants and animals to die. That's why this biological treatment step is so important. Step 4, the secondary clarifiers. In these secondary clarifiers, we let the water be still again. Here, the bacteria clump together and sink, helping pull other suspended particles out of the water. These bacteria are collected, and some are sent back to the treatment process to be reused. Step 5. LOTT uses ultraviolet UV light for disinfection. The ultraviolet light deactivates any bacteria or pathogens left in the water. Here you have it, the treated wastewater called final effluent that is ready to be released into Puget Sound. What you sent us when you flushed the toilet or drained the sink arrived here looking like this, and now leaves like this. This water has been treated to advanced secondary standards, the highest level of treatment currently provided at any wastewater treatment plant along Puget Sound. That's the process that protects our waters that takes place 24 hours a day, 365 days a year at the LOTT Butt Inlet Treatment Plant.
that's a little bit about how we do that. There's sometimes it's kind of funny if folks want to see those type of videos, if it's 8 a.m. and you're eating breakfast or drinking a cup of coffee or something, but it's something we take very seriously, how we do that treatment. So there are more videos that we have if you go to our website, and they're linked here. So in the presentation we provided, you can click on these links and they should work. But again, we're proud of these videos, and they provide a good overview if you needed to share those with any of your constituents. So we also get resources from the wastewater. It's biosolids, electricity and heat, and reclaimed water. The biosolids are what's removed up front in some of those physical processes, but also a lot of that bacteria that we use to break down the nitrogen. We have to waste some of that, and that goes into our digestion process, which is stabilized there and creates a beneficial product that's used as a fertilizer in Eastern Washington. And we're part of a King County driven program to apply biosolids in Eastern Washington there in Douglas County. We also take the gas off of the digesters themselves and produce electricity and heat. So we burn the methane gas, which in boilers, and that produces heat. So for our systems and our administration building, as well as the Hands-On Children's Museum across the street from us. And then electricity in the engine generator that you can see here pictured in the center, we produce about 15 to 20% of our plant energy off of this engine generation system. And reclaimed water, as I mentioned before, about 1.5 million gallons per day of reclaimed water produced at our Budd Inlet plant. We also have reclaimed water at our Martin Way treatment facility, about 2 million gallons per day capacity in Lacey. And so that Class A reclaimed water is a drop for drop offset from potable water. So it's treated to a very high standard. It's approved to use for anything other than drinking. And so how that's used in front of the Children's Museum is an outreach project and public community amenity in our stream. We have irrigation at the Tumwater Golf Course pictured here in the center and the bottom. There's about 600,000 gallons per day in the summer. And the tank featured in the center here is what stores that. It's a 1 million gallon tank built into the hillside that provides that water for the golf course. There's also a park that the city of Tumwater put on top of that, and we collaborated with them. Capitol Campus Grounds as part of that reclaimed water system, as well as out in Hawks Prairie, we have infiltration system that goes through some wetland ponds prior to discharge into infiltration, and that offsets groundwater. And all that was driven from what we call our highly managed plan. It's called the Wastewater Resource Management Plan formally. And that was developed in the late 90s. And the concept there is really invest in wastewater treatment as a valuable resource and look for those community benefits to show that. And so we're continuously planning for how we're going to expand our reclaimed water capacity as our community grows. That the limits on the discharges into the sound are capped, and so as we grow as a community, we're going to be expanding more into our reclaimed water systems. So part of that planning is an update right now of our master plan, and we completed phase 1 in draft form in our Budd Inlet treatment plan on how we're going to look to expand there, and we're looking to invest more in our central treatment plant for efficiency, but also look out into our system on how we manage capacity. So once that reclaimed water is produced, how is that going to offset groundwater supplies? Where are good infiltration areas? How can that be beneficially reused? And so that's what's ongoing now prior to phase 3, which would be outreach and education on it. The other thing we do out of the wastewater resource management plan is annual reports that we submit to Ecology. And LOTT's a little bit different than some other municipalities that do some of this type of planning, where they might do a 6-year plan, build a plant, grow into it. We do continuously planning efforts, and those have paid off because technology changes, growth rates and sewering rates change. And so we look at our flow and loads, we look at how much inflow and infiltration is coming into our pipes, we look at the capacity we have, and we put that together with our asset management program from our maintenance group, and then that goes into our capital plan and our biennial budget. And so the average customer that would get a bill for sewer that's connected to any of the city's sewer would see a lot charge and a city sewer charge. And that's after they've already connected up to the system. And what our monthly service fee is called our wastewater service charge, or WSC. It's about $42 per month. And that's the cost of maintaining all those systems that you saw in the video. That's only part of them, but the treatment plants, the pump stations, pipelines, all those systems that go into maintaining all that infrastructure to take a product that's not usable and will harm our environment and turning into a safe product. And then there's a connection fee that also that each jurisdiction has, but that connection fee allows us to invest in infrastructure to accommodate that growth. So what we do biennially when we look at our budget is we look at our rates and compare them to how we stack up in our region. And we're happy to report that we have the most strict effluent limits on Puget Sound, but if you can see when you add the wastewater rates of LOTT plus the cities to get the wastewater charge, Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater are below average. So we think that our community is getting good value for the treatment that we're providing. And what we do with financial planning is we do a 6-year plan. We do the biennial budget, which is highlighted here in blue that the board took action on the end of last year. But what we do is, because we're so heavily driven by capital projects, about 75% of our budget is capital investments needed to maintain the infrastructure, is that we index, we look at the construction index and make sure we're staying equal with the inflation of construction. And that goes up and down, but in general, we've looked at staying about 3% allows us to keep up with that. And then we live within our means. We say, okay, if we can set it at 3% over this 6-year period, we can go ahead and modify projects accordingly as we go. And because our projects take sometimes, years in the making, sometimes, a lot of times years to just complete the construction. So as I mentioned before, our capital budget, our capital and debt service is about 3/4 of our budget, and operating here is about 1/4. And these are the latest numbers shown here from our biennial budget. Some of our upcoming projects in that capital plan are our biological process improvements, our digester refurbishment, our collection system, and our Martin Way efforts. And our biological process improvements one, to highlight that is, that's about a $29 million construction effort. It's taking about 30 months of construction and years of planning and design. And we're excited to get this done because it will improve our energy efficiency of our plant by over 20% plant-wide. And that's significant when you think about us spending over $1 million a year on power just to pump and aerate wastewater for treatment. But also upgrade systems for new technology that are approaching 30 years old. That'll put us in good shape into the future as regulations start to continue to change. And then our digester refurbishment, those were built in 1982, our digesters. Those are what stabilizes those biosolids that go to Eastern Washington and produce that gas. We want to make sure that those systems and that gas is contained and allows us to beneficially reuse those products. Our collection system, we don't have a large one just like the cities, but we do have significant large pipelines that needed to be televised and inspected. And in general, they're in pretty good shape, but we do have some efforts that we need to do in order to maintain that. And out at our Martin Way reclaimed water plant, there's some targeted upgrades to make sure we have redundancy out at that plant. And so the challenges that we're looking towards in the future is sea level rise, and we're working with the Port and City of Olympia on that effort. We're doing a reclaimed water infiltration study that's been ongoing for several years, and that looks at the pharmaceutical personal care products, we're calling those residual chemicals, that a lot of them, are made to not break down in systems. So as an example, sucralose or artificial sweetener doesn't break down in your body to a great extent. Well, it passes through, it goes in the treatment plant. There's a certain amount of removal, but the treatment plants weren't built for that. And so what removal happens, what's the fate and transport of these chemicals? Are they harmful? So there's a large group of scientists that's helping us with this effort, and more to come rolling out later this year. Regulatorily, the Bud Inlet itself will have a total maximum daily load, and that's a cap on nitrogen. That's coming, and we're preparing for that. We're part of the Capitol Lake work group for the EIS. We're tracking that closely. And then there's recently a draft permit that came out from Ecology for Puget Sound, and that will require many of the other treatment plants on Puget Sound to do nutrient removal. We've been doing nutrient removal since the early 90s. So the benefits to LOTT for other plants doing nutrient removal is actually some of those nutrients that come down our way will be lessened. But certainly there's some changes that we'll need to make under that general permit. And then like most other organizations, we have had COVID impacts, and to us, that's revenue. But to touch on how we've adjusted our staff working hours, locations, spread out, minimized who needs to be at the plant, fully staffed with our operations and maintenance because we need to be, and our control systems folks, and we've adjusted well there. Our wet science center continues to be closed, and we've been having discussions about when's appropriate to open that up again. As we did last night, we still have online board meetings as we're presenting to you, even now like this. We are projecting a revenue shortfall of about $7.5 million over 5 years, and that's primarily driven from commercial and the reduction of commercial that we've seen. Interesting changes that we've seen is that with folks working from home, a lot of those flows that will go to commercial businesses that are built on volumetric, folks are home working, and so that's a flat rate. But from a wastewater characteristic standpoint, folks are doing a lot more cooking at home, for example, and so we saw more grease in our system because restaurants are the ones that have the grease traps. So just interesting little nuances there on our side from wastewater standpoint. And with all that, we wanted to highlight that we have met our performance objectives, and we completed our annual report for 2020, and that's posted now. So we haven't had any pollutant exceedances into Bud Inlet, hundreds of millions of gallons of reclaimed water produced, thousands of wet tons of biosolids generated, and also we've generated quite a bit of electricity from our engine generator. And so those are just a few of them that we picked out, and there's a full report that we put together with some of our other metrics that's available. So with that, I'll stop, and Mike and I can take any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. Matt, questions from the board. Start with Commissioner Mejia.
Thank you for this presentation, and thank you for the video. I am a visual person, so that really broke it down for me. I appreciate that. I just have one question, and it's in regards to, let me find the slide. It's in regard to the fees. And Thurston County's rates are broken down into several areas, and I was just wondering why, and I mean, it seems like we have the highest rates too.
So I'll go back to that slide so that you're talking about here.
The rate comparison.
Our small systems are very expensive.
Economy of scale.
Yeah, I think that's the correct answer. If you're looking at that Tamashan at the top there in Tenino, and yeah, those are all very small plants, and as a result, their cost per unit of work is just frankly much higher. We enjoy an economy of scale that helps us keep our costs significantly lower than that. There are some big cities that are up there in that world. You see Seattle and small cities as well, Chehalis and Centralia. A lot of things go into that, and it's really difficult to do apples to apples comparisons because these plants all are different, and they run differently, and they're built in different environments and in different places, and all of that compounds often how the costs are assessed. So I hope that's enough answer for you, but there's just a lot of factors in that.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, I have just a couple of questions for knowledge base for me, I think. The 7,500 wet tons, I take it you truck those over to Eastern Washington. Is that how that's handled?
Correct.
And then how much do county taxpayers pay into the total operation here? And I don't know that they're all hooked up, but what's Thurston County's participation?
As far as the rates, no, we have no rate customers who are Thurston County. I mean, we have Thurston County doesn't have rates that we collect. There are folks, and I hope I get this correct, there are some folks who live outside the city limits, but who are on city systems, probably not so much anymore. And they do pay, but they pay through the city. But there's not all that many of it. Most, I would say the significant portion in the 90th percentile of all of our rates comes from the jurisdictions, the three cities. So there's no tax that anybody pays. It's only service rates.
Okay.
Is that?
Yep, that's it. That's what I needed, Mike. Thanks. On page 3, you talk about, some numbers and some percentages on those bullets. Could you, I don't know, give me a little better breakdown of that explanation on the total population? I'm trying to figure that out. If we got sewered population, total population, and septic system population. I'm just trying to figure out how that boils down into toilets, I guess, or hookups, or
Sure.
something.
And that's it's a lot of factored math, quite frankly, because everything in our world is broken down into what we call equivalent residential units, or ERUs, and that's an amount of volume. And then you have to look at the demographic issues, which are how many people per household, how many people per family, whatever the average is. That changes regularly. But our most current numbers, and most of this comes from Thurston Regional Planning, so TRPC, factored in that total population that is serviced in those three areas that you see on the map there is about 175,000. Sewered population is just, again, a factored piece of math that says of that, about 116,000 people are on the system. Now, in terms of how many accounts that is, or equivalent residential units, it's about 60,000 accounts. So it breaks down that way. I mean, if you can do the math there, there's roughly two point something people for an equivalent residential unit. The septic system population, again, is a factored number, but I can tell you that we know there's about 17,000 septic systems in our service area. And about 11,500 of them are in Lacey, and I shouldn't have said 500 because I'm not sure how close that number really is, but it's over 11,000 are in the Lacey service area. You would imagine that over the years, as areas have developed and they get stretched further and further away from the main sewer lines, it often cases was financially impractical to hook them to the system. But over time, we hope to bring those all onto the system, and we're addressing, and I say we, I mean collectively, the jurisdictions and LOTT are addressing those system by system.
So that, Mike, that could be like the UGA of the municipalities and future hookups, you might say.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, these are existing hookups. But in the future,
we're hooked up to that 55,000.
Well, you're not hooked up. No, they're just they're
going to be hooked up.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 55,000 are just counted within our service area as individual systems. They're not on our system. We don't collect rates from them, but they are in existence.
Okay.
But the cities there are some of them that are inside the city limits. And those are the ones we're trying to address right now. And then there will be some that are brought in. A good example of that, Commissioner, is right now Lacey is undertaking a large project to convert around 400 septic tanks in the Capitol Golf Course area. I forgot what they call that. Matt, do you remember the name of that?
I don't, but that's the area.
It's a neighborhood, and they're all on septic systems and around the Capitol Golf Course. And they've all agreed to, and I'm not sure they're part of the city, but they've all agreed to come into the city now. And we are, I should say again, Lacey is primarily converting all those systems. LOTT participates in that by rebating half of the connection fee. So as an incentive for them to change over.
And just my final question real quick is, what happens to the 50 million gallons on occasion, you know, a rainstorm or whatever that is? So when you really get a mass of fluid headed downstream, does it all go through your system that normally handles 12 million gallons a day?
Go ahead.
That's a good question. Yeah, so it does not. So we buffer it out. So we have equalization tanks that sit below our digesters. They're underground tanks that we make sure are empty. When we look at the forecast and we see it coming, we make sure that's empty. We also make some other changes in our system and make sure that once those are full, we actually have some spare tankage that's normally used for processes that we can fill up if we need to. So basically we fill up tanks and then we buffer it the whole way. So we need to treat all of it, but we can meter it through.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Commissioner Edwards, when things are normal again and you want to come back to one of our barbecues, you should also think about coming down when we're in the middle of one of those rainstorms, because it gets pretty exciting.
Yeah.
With all those tanks are redlined right at the top, and we start to be really nervous about having to open up the valves and just let it out into the inlet. Those are exciting moments
Right.
in wastewater treatment.
I mean, we're way ahead of everybody else as far as doing those type of releases if you think about all the other jurisdictions on the Puget Sound, aren't we?
That's correct. Actually, LOTT has a very, very strict record and board-driven policy about how many bypasses or what the state would call overflows into Bud Inlet, whereas other plants north of us, as part of their normal practice, will discharge partially treated or untreated wastewater because they have no capacity to manage it. They just don't have enough capacity. The city of Seattle and King County wound up with a $4 billion lawsuit settlement with the Department of Ecology because their system was so undersized and they just had too many of those discharges. And there were several notorious ones that were in the newspaper back a few years ago that were significant. So you're absolutely right. I think LOTT has a tremendous track record. I think the last bypass we had was about what, Matt?
13, 14 years ago, maybe once in maybe 20 plus years. Yeah.
Well, thank you and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to seeing you come back to visit us again.
I'll come down for the picnic once in a while. I think you guys do great work down there and you have a great picnic. I don't know if I'm coming when it's raining real hard though.
Yeah. That's the fun time though.
Okay.
Okay, so we are out of time, but I wanted to ask Ramiro, Robin, or Jennifer if there was anything that needed to be addressed from your perspective before we adjourn.
No, sir. I really appreciate Mike and Matt coming over. Very informative. It's always a good opportunity to learn more about your business, and always a pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Jennifer, are you good?
Agreed. I appreciate the explanation that Mike gave regarding where we are in terms of service rates. So.
Okay, that we're adjourned and the board will be back in session for agenda setting just in a few minutes. Sir.
5 minutes? 5 minutes, sir?
5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.